Many people will be shocked by XRP's next upward rise, particularly at this moment when everyone thinks the market has peaked and that we're simply going to keep selling off and enter a bear market. I'm not attempting to clickbait you guys either. No, I'm not trying to sell you any hopium. I am referring to a significant resurgence of the market as a whole, and I believe that many people will be taken aback by this next significant positive development. That will actually surprise a lot of people in my opinion, since everyone is already certain of what they believe will happen next. That is that we will simply keep selling off, and that there won't be any more upside moves, and that the old season is a hoax. It will never take place. This or anything. Welcome to Peepo Coin Channel. Before I go over a bunch of this, for those of you who are channel subscribers, you do become subscribers after seeing this video. As we quickly examine this market, we can see that it has been very stable thus far, I must say. The stability of this market has really impressed me. There haven't been any significant movements in the area that we've noticed. For instance, Bitcoin has increased by over 10% during the past 7 days. This will happen in a week. I mean 10% for cryptocurrency in a single week. That is nothing at all. However, aside from that, XRP is up roughly 16%, and the majority of cryptocurrencies have increased significantly during the past 7 days, which we adore seeing. Currently, many of them are only recovering from the lows. However, we'd want to see some improvements. Here we hope to see some significant changes. In particular, we would like to see old coins, like XRP for instance, return to their former highs. We go all the way back to January, in this instance, when we did touch roughly $3.40. Are we simply going to sell out of XRP from here before we reach those highs? Before we reach those peaks, I do believe that we may have a short-term, sell off a little bit more chop. But first I want to discuss the variables that are driving this next rise on XRP, which, assuming we're going off of the current market cap high of roughly $3.84, will theoretically take us not only to a new all-time high. However, I also believe that will lead to price discovery, where we will reach this cycle's big peak. Let's begin by exposing the major driving force behind XRP's upcoming significant increase, which is undoubtedly the ETFs. I think the case will be resolved entirely in the next, although I believe it could happen at any time. I would contend that we should have a significant update on the SEC case within the next week. The 2x leveraged XRP ETF is now online and trading thanks to Nate Egaraki, co-founder of the ETF Institute, host of ETF Prime, and president of ETF Store. The SEC should approve spot XRP ETFs sooner rather than later, in my opinion. Furthermore, I do believe that this is essentially inevitable. How long do we have to wait for this, I wonder? As I previously stated, I believe that everyone is currently merely waiting for the SEC to declare, hey, guess what? The case is done. However, I believe that the case has been essentially resolved for a few weeks at this point. However, I do believe that after the official release, we will probably see the following announcements, which will include the approval of XRP ETFs. Yes, we do currently have an ETF that is active and trading, and it is called XRP. That 2x long daily XRP ETF is this one. Additionally, it currently has roughly $27 million attached to it. To be honest, nothing too important. Furthermore, I wasn't particularly expecting this to do very well just because of the company that made it. It would have been doing much better, I'm sure, if it had been a well-known band like BlackRock, Fidelity, or whatever. It's not too horrible though, isn't it? Not too wild. $27 million in around 8 days. Not the greatest, but once more, we must consider the business that initiated this. The name isn't very well known. However, this is a 2x leveraged ETF that is already up and trading. What therefore is actually preventing spot ETFs? I don't give much thought. We therefore consider those ETFs to be a major force in this, a major catalyst, if you will. Even stranger is the fact that Cointelegraph, which is a website that runs on CoinDesk, also published an article today regarding XRP ETFs. Update was the first one. With around 10 active applications, XRP is leading the Queen ETF race, followed by Solana, Litecoin, and Doge. Which cryptocurrency ETF do you believe will be approved first, based on SEC files that Keiko Research tracks? The crazy thing about this, though, is that I believe there are additional applications. Naturally, the 10 names they are watching are most likely just the names themselves, but some of those names that have already submitted an ETF application have around 2 or 3 XRP ETFs for which they are awaiting approval. The last time I looked, there were approximately 16 or 18 ETF filings for XRP, which is crazy, so you need to add maybe 6 more to this list. You can see that the market is incredibly hungry for XRP ETFs, even though it's crazy. Since the majority of those applications originate from institutional giants, I refer to the market as the institutional players. Therefore, I believe it will only be a matter of time until these are approved. If they are all approved at once, then you will have to wait to see what actually happens for XRP, because I believe that it will be a huge driver of price action as well as a very significant announcement. We also have CoinDesk over here, and as you are aware, XRP and Solana are top contenders for approval of US spot ETFs because of their strong liquidity, with XRP perhaps starting early. Yes, I agree that an earlier launch for XRP makes sense. It's a much bigger altcoin than Solana, by about $60 billion. The volume of trading is essentially same. It's really near. However, over the past 30 days or so, XRP has grown significantly in terms of trade volume. However, you also need to consider the amount of trading volume that XRP has brought in thus far, similar to the previous quarter. When evaluating this from an institutional standpoint, they are most likely examining XRP and stating that it is the third largest altcoin. First and second, it appears that XRP is receiving a lot of attention from the retail sector, which indicates that they are eager for an ETF. Furthermore, you must consider the fact that XRP has been incredibly successful thus far this season. Once more, you may refer to it as a bull run or an old season. It's not that important, is it? Although we are aware that the old season hasn't yet affected this market, XRP has performed better than Bitcoin thus far in this cycle. In addition, Bitcoin has done significantly better than Ethereum over the past year. Furthermore, it has much exceeded Solana when we consider that as well. Because of how successful XRP has been so far this cycle, I believe that the institutional players who have submitted their applications are likely pushing for the XRP ETF to be approved first when we're considering an ETF for XRP. Therefore, it makes a lot of sense to launch XRP first. However, it's absurd to see CoinDesk and Cointelegraph be optimistic about XRP, despite the fact that we know they have been strongly opposed to it for a very long time. You guys know, if you do. However, before to Solana, Paul Barron had Stephen McClure discuss the XRP ETF on his YouTube channel. Now keep in mind that Stephen is the CEO of Canary Funds, which has an application for XRP. However, have a look at Solana and XRP. Out of those, which do you believe the SEC might win first? That is an excellent question. I will choose XRP for several reasons. Well, according to the courts, it's not a security that makes things simple. For all of the aforementioned, XRP is a favorite. Come on in. I also concur with HR, by the way. HR is excellent. The same thing. Solana. Yes, pay attention as we consider XRP in depth. XRP would have the ETF before Solana for a number of reasons, including the court ruling, retail interest, performance thus far in this cycle, size, and the fact that it is the third largest cryptocurrency. Once more, it simply makes a great deal of sense. On top of that, let's consider what XRP will do next, because many people are beginning to discuss what might happen with XRP in the future. The rising wedge breakdown that we are seeing here indicates that the attempt to rebound from the lows of April 7